The Fifth Estate, tonight.
She was young and beautiful, her life brimming with promise.
She was full of life and she would dance. She was always happy. She was very special.
But just as she was poised on the brink of life's opportunities, someone killed Alexandra Wiwcharuk. A brutal crime. It shocked Saskatoon. Investigators had some leads, but little know-how.
Says I killed her.
Says Lord, I killed her.
And over 40 years, the case went cold. But the memory of Alex Wiwcharuk wouldn't go away. And now, as we reopen the mystery, we raise the tantalizing possibility of a solution. If I was a policeman at the time, you would have been one of my prime suspects.
And now, Lyndon McIntyre.
Good evening, and welcome to the Fifth Estate. As sometimes happens in our line of work, it began with a phone call. A viewer had a story, a sad story, stuck in her memory, and it wouldn't go away. Though a prominent Canadian writer herself, she thought we'd be the best ones to tell it. And as sometimes happens with story ideas that come to us that way, she was right about this one. We found that it had stuck not just in the memories, but in the hearts of a lot of people. A lovely and promising young life suddenly and brutally ended. A police investigation that should have been rich in potential suspects that went nowhere. The murder of Alexandra Wiwcharuk filed for decades as unsolved. But ironically, as the mystery slumbered in the obscurity of a police evidence locker, science evolved and may now provide the tools to solve it. It is the beginning of the 60s. The optimistic innocence of the 50s yet to be replaced by the exuberance of a new decade. Saskatoon is a city still confident in its essential decency, trusting that a simple lifestyle will always be the surest guarantee of public safety. In 1961, Johnny Cash is still years away from the peak of his fame. To publicize a performance here, he promotes a contest to find the girl in Saskatoon.
I'm freezing, but I'm burning for the girl in Saskatoon.
A young nurse named Alexandra Wiwcharuk claims the title and a moment in the limelight. She has the looks and a personality that draw people to her. Now she is on the threshold of an era that will redefine youth and the roles of women in the world. But fate has a darker destiny in store for the girl in Saskatoon. She grew up near Yorkton, where she was the youngest of 10 kids in a farm family. After high school in Saskatoon, she returned to Yorkton to become a nurse.
She was always the happiest kid around. And I think maybe because she was the last child in our family and Mom and Dad sort of glowed over her.
Her eldest sister, Marie Moss, remembers her energy, her sense of fun.
She was full of life and she would dance. She was always happy. She was very special.
Author Sharon Butala grew up in Saskatoon and went to the same high school as Alexandra.
My first specific memory is in grade 11 when we were all in a drama club. I can remember girls calling her Little Al.
After high school, they went their separate ways. But it wasn't the last Sharon Butala would hear of Little Al.
There was only 15 in our class, so we got to know each other quite well.
Alice Hilburn went through nursing school with Alex Wiwcharuk. After graduating, they got jobs at Saskatoon City Hospital and lived here with 2 other nurses. Alice Hilburn remembers the warm Friday evening just before the Victoria Day weekend in 1962. It was May 18th.
Alex borrowed a blouse of mine, so I presumed that she was going out doing something. I do think that she was going to go for a little walk. It was a lovely time of the year.
She lived a short walk from City Hospital, where she was scheduled for duty at 11:30 that night. She bought stamps, mailed letters. The South Saskatchewan River, then as now, a magnet for restless young people on a warm spring evening. And on that evening, she paused here for a quiet, private moment. Shortly afterwards, she vanished. Hugh Carlton was dating her at the time. That night, he'd hoped to see her, if only briefly.
I phoned Alex's residence to see if I could drive her to work that night, but when I phoned, she'd gone out to mail a letter.
She was a dedicated nurse, scrupulous about punctuality. But that night, she failed to show up at the hospital.
I think I'd already gotten into bed when the phone rang, and it was the hospital, and she was supposed to be on duty that evening. And at the time, I thought, oh, she's not paid attention to time.
By morning, Alice Hilburn was becoming panicky.
I knew 100% that there was something really bad wrong.
People who didn't know Alexandra very well assumed she'd just gone off on a wild weekend. The report of her disappearance went to Saskatoon's morality squad. This was Saskatoon, where bad things never happen. And it was springtime. Promise of summertime was in the air. Young people were on the move. Saturday morning, her unsuspecting boyfriend left town to spend the weekend with friends.
We hadn't been in Waskesiu very long before the RCMP came by to talk to me to see if Alex was with me or whether I knew anything more about where she might be.
The long spring weekend slipped by. The city, for the most part, unaware of an escalating dread among the friends of Alexandra Wiwcharuk. They knew she would never have just run away from her responsibilities. By the end of the weekend, the missing nurse was a news story. Wilf Popov, a 20-year-old reporter, had a hunch that this was about more than just another runaway.
This wasn't your typical missing person. This was not the type of woman who would stay overnight at a boyfriend's. I mean, it just didn't fit. I was trying to get more information, but beyond her roommates and her parents, there was not much that I could uncover. And of course, the police, they weren't bothering with that file at all.
The newspaper stories grew more ominous, but still the police and the public seemed to expect that, like most disappearances, this one would end on a happy note. The last anyone had seen of her, she was walking here, presumably making her way home. A week went by. Police used boats to search the river, a dog to search the riverbank. They found nothing. Then 3 boys fishing in the same area went looking for worms in a small grove of bushes. Bill Cheddar was only 5, but he clearly remembers what he saw that day.
We stumbled across something sticking out of the ground that didn't look normal. We poked at it a bit with a stick. We thought it might have been a body.
They told an uncle who didn't believe them. It would be nearly another week before they persuaded some older cousins to visit the scene.
We decided to take the 3 girls and show them what we saw, see what, they thought of it, eh? Well, they kind of freaked out, got scared of it, and went yelling to Uncle Andy.
She had been missing 13 days. Police made inquiries as far away as Quebec. They finally found her 800 yards from home, buried in a shallow grave. Clutching 30 strands of reddish-brown hair ripped from the scalp of her attacker. She'd been raped, her head battered with a 12-pound block of concrete, and buried alive. She was 23 years old. For the tight-knit Wiwcharuk family, the loss of the youngest was an incomprehensible tragedy. Her sister, Marie Moss, remembers.
Oh God, I just froze. Oh God, we just screamed, cried, yelled. Then they had to tell Mom and Dad. My dad just froze. My mother, she didn't speak. that night. She passed out on the floor. That was awful. It was just terrible.
Something about a murder rouses public sentiment like no other crime. The murder of this young woman stunned even the police department.
The chief of police, James Kettles, was quite upset with this because he prided himself in running a tight ship and a good city. He said that night that this was the most heinous crime he had ever seen in his career.
All murders are brutal, but there was a particular savagery in this one. The killer must have been a maniac, but there was evidence of a ferocious struggle before she died. She probably left marks on him. He shouldn't have been hard to find. But a crucial 13 days had passed, and this was a construction site. The murder scene was hopelessly compromised. To discover what happened here, it would be necessary to reconstruct the final hours of her life. It was a 12-and-a-half-minute walk from home to the riverbank, where she was seen by several people between 8:30 and 10 that Friday night. Some teenage boys who were fishing at the river reported seeing a pretty woman sitting alone, staring thoughtfully at the water. Barry Gunther was 15.
She did appear to be somewhat older than we were, but not terribly. She had a small stature. I can see her sitting there with her arms wrapped around her legs, and she was by herself and just looking out over the river. It appears as though she was, or could have been, waiting for someone.
The boys wanted to catch her eye, flirt a bit with an older lady. Barry Gunther was designated to do the talking, but he was shy and he stalled for time.
Perhaps to fortify my courage, we were going to go to Meads and buy a snack, come back and sit and talk to her. And when we did get back, she was no longer there.
Among the many unanswered questions from that evening more than 40 years ago, one still haunts Barry Gunther. What if? What if he'd suppressed his shyness? What if he'd gone and talked to her? What if the boys delayed her departure from the river for just a few minutes, or walked away beside her? And maybe...
I have thought, what if? And if we could turn back time, I've predicted in my own head that at that night anyway, she wouldn't have met the fate that she did.
When we come back, the mystery that became an obsession.
You think you know who did it?
I think so, yes.
And now we return to the Fifth Estate.
Saskatoon would never quite see itself the same way after May of 1962. Until then, ordinary people just assumed their streets were as safe as their homes.
I don't think there was the ever-present thought of danger, having to look behind your back sort of thing. There wasn't that much crime like there is now.
For policeman Roman Keltoff, now retired, even a mysterious disappearance wouldn't have meant much at first.
It just wasn't unusual to go by yourself, even after dark. It wouldn't have raised that much concern.
But the murder of Alex Wiwcharuk changed all that. And as the grim details of the crime filtered into the community consciousness, an awful truth was born. If it could happen to her, it could happen to anybody. Sharon Butala is renowned for 16 books of fiction and nonfiction, almost all meditations on prairie life, where violent crime was and still is rare.
It was very unusual at that time, especially a young, pretty woman, a nurse. I mean, she wasn't a prostitute on the West Side. She was a young woman, you know, entitled to respect and leading a decent life. So it was very unusual.
Out of shock comes a desperate need for reassurance that it really is unusual, that this terrible crime really is exceptional, something abnormal and thus unlikely to ever reoccur. But in peaceful, decent Saskatoon, the police lacked the experience to solve a crime of random violence as brutal as this one.
I don't know if I worked on any murder cases, or how many at that time. It was a rare occurrence. Yeah, you just sort of used your common sense as best you can and kept on talking, kept on asking.
Talking and asking wouldn't get him very far. Almost everyone on the 131-man city police force worked on the case, but as the weeks went by, it was clear they were getting nowhere. Even for the young reporter, Wilf Popoff, it became obvious the Saskatoon police were stymied right from the start.
While they were investigating it, there were suggestions that they should bring in some smarter detectives, say from Toronto, who would show them how to solve the case. And of course, they were really incensed with that suggestion. No, they could do it themselves. But the fact is, they had never done anything like this. They'd never had a case like this before. But I'm sure that they were intent on solving it, and they were beaten.
The police would never solve the crime, but the city would never forget the murder that stripped away its innocence. Her death got stuck somewhere in the psyche of this community, of the people her own age, of people in her neighborhood, of the policemen who somehow feel they let her down when they failed to catch her murderer. But as the city grew and changed with the world around it, the nagging questions about the murderer of Alexandra Wiwcharuk remained as unchanged as the quiet riverbank on which it happened nearly 42 years ago. In the late 90s, Sharon Butala was turning her mind to a new book project.
And I began to think that I would like to write a novel set in Saskatoon in the 50s and early 60s. Of course, I thought of Alex's murder right away. I was thinking, well, I could write about this, I could write about that, and oh, remember such and such. And Alex was murdered. And then I began to think, but they never found the person who did it, eh? I wonder why not.
For any author, an unsolved murder makes for a compelling story. For Sharon Butala, this was personal. She grew up in Saskatoon. She knew the victim. She started asking questions. Eventually, a local politician offered help.
She said, listen, if you are seriously interested in pursuing this matter, I know someone else who is, and I can put you in touch with him.
Her persistence would lead her to Ed Jakubowski, a Saskatoon policeman for 38 years. He's now retired, but like Sharon Butala, he was nagged by the unsolved murder and by an almost mystical bond with the victim.
Well, first off, it's maybe somebody murdered that you could identify with from an age point of view. Not only murdered, but raped and so on, and then left in such a location and that sort of thing. And it just made you want to get to the bottom of it, do something with it.
Adding to his interest in the Wiwcharuk murder was a persistent hunch about who did it.
I had first become suspicious of a particular individual back in 1967, which is some 5 years after the crime. And at that time, I was still in uniform and working patrol division.
But the Wiwcharuk file was in the detective division. Ed was just a uniformed patrolman, and he was advised to stick to his beat, leave murder to the serious cops. Decades would pass. Ed Jakubowski moved up through the ranks, but never forgot the Wiwcharuk file. By 1994, he was head of the murder and robbery squad.
And in that capacity, I could get access to this file, and I always wanted to have a look at it to see what ever happened to my suspicions way back then.
And what did you find out?
Well, I found out that very little happened.
And perhaps not much ever would have happened but for the persistence of a few stubborn old cops like Jakubowski and a famous writer who by the late 90s was also obsessed with the Wiwcharuk murder.
I had made up my mind by this time to find out everything that I could, to at least know that there were no loose ends. I was very naive. I did not know that I would not get one word of information from anybody, anywhere, at any time, that I would be totally stonewalled at every single turn.
By 1998, Ed Jakubowski was ready to hand in his badge, but the frustration of his inability to advance the murder file would follow him into retirement.
Well, although I had maintained possession of this file, I wasn't actually able to do anything with it. And then it was just taken away and assigned to another person.
You think you know who did it?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
And how sure are you in your belief that you know who did it? I mean...
Well, I'm satisfied. I know who did it. Whether I'd be able to prove that, particularly at this late stage, may be difficult. That's not impossible.
His policing days are far behind him now, but Ed Jakubowski remains convinced that he knows who murdered Alexandra Wiwcharuk. As we discover in our own investigation, he's far from unique in that regard. Many people in Saskatoon, a lot of them former cops, think they know who killed her. But we'd also learn that a lot of that certainty is wishful thinking, out of a natural compulsion to find answers for deeply disturbing questions, even if the answers get in the way of truth. It was a visit to Alexandra's grave 3 years ago that sealed Sharon Butala's commitment to find whatever truth may yet be learned about the murder of her friend.
I really felt that she was saying to me, they stole this from me and I want justice, you know. I want to be, I hate to say this, it's so corny, you know, but, you know, I want vengeance. You know, I want to rest easy, kind of. It was having her life stolen from her that she, in this moment, seemed to say to me was the great crime, that everything lay before her and it was snatched away.
When we come back, new blood for a cold file.
I want you to see that car as you walk by it and tell me what you see.
It's an old car, like an old Ford. There's 3 people in it.
And now we return to the Fifth Estate.
As the year 2003 began, the Saskatoon police had bigger things to think about than a 41-year-old murder. A series of scandals, high-profile wrongful convictions, suspicious deaths threatened the very future of the city police force. But for one Saskatoon police officer, the Wiwcharuk file deserved at least one all-out effort before time sealed it shut forever. Sergeant Neil Wiley.
Well, it's the ultimate crime within society. I think everyone fears you know, being a victim of a heinous crime like murder.
He was just a boy in 1962, but Wiley believes an unsolved murder leaves an indelible mark upon a community.
The police investigation kind of provide the last voice for the victim, and they can bring to the family maybe the reasons why something like that happened.
Sharon Butala's high profile and persistent interest in the Wiwcharuk files would eventually pay off. Sergeant Wiley's assignment for the past year has been to sift through the witness statements and old police reports and to re-examine crime scene evidence, panning for small nuggets of useful information.
I think the length of time that's passed, witness memories are, you know, at best, I'd say vague. Some of the investigators just don't recall events. So we're relying, which is a good thing, we're relying on some information which was left and documented at the time of the investigation. That's our strongest tool.
The second strongest tool is modern technology. Information analysis by computer. The ability to read the human gene structure.
This is all her clothes. Okay.
Technology with potential that was unimaginable in 1962. when it was even impossible to distinguish evidence from litter.
Says I killed her.
Says Lord, I killed her.
We'll put them down into categories because although we've got investigators saying that they found these things, we don't know for sure
what continuity is there. I have no idea.
Came after, and I know that note is one of the problems or one of the things that was brought after. I mean, an offender could have returned to the scene.
In the forensic aspect of things, we're faced with deteriorating exhibits. It affects DNA. And even the documentation and the file itself, how it was put together in a chronological way, is difficult to follow as compared to what we did today.
And this is the piece of cement.
And
that was found on her chest.
Now this is a report dated the 31st of May when she's discovered. One piece of broken cement.
Sir.
One brick.
Yep, it's right there.
3 empty beer bottles.
It's there.
They've got down here a bunch of dark reddish brown hair, approximately 30 strands, 4 to 5 inches in length.
They're probably our most critical exhibits here.
May 18th, 1962. She spent more than an hour at the river, long enough to be noticed by a killer with reddish brown hair. A red-haired teenager named Billy McGaffin was fishing there that night and later told police he left the river at about the same time as a young woman fitting Alexandra's description. At first, police considered him a suspect. Under hypnosis, he all but cleared himself, but a transcript of that session reveals a tantalizing bit of information that might have been profoundly significant. He described a mysterious two-tone car. Here's a part of the transcript read by actors.
I want you to see that car as you walk by it and tell me what you see.
It's an old car, like an old Ford. There's 3 people in it.
What do they look like?
There was 3 boys, like teenagers.
What are they doing? Just sitting there?
Just sitting there.
His subconscious memory was remarkably precise, and it was significant because another witness reported seeing a similar car later that night, parked across the street, near where the body was found almost 2 weeks later. But the hypnotist seemed uninterested in the two-tone car.
Are there any other cars now on your way down Spadina Crescent?
There is one parked along the river on the west side.
What does this car look like?
It's a fairly new car, red car.
Red, is it?
The reference to a red car derailed what might have been a critical line of inquiry about the mystery car and 3 young men who've never been identified. All because of a flashy red Corvette like this one. It was owned by a construction worker and self-styled ladies' man named Joey, and he was one of the first serious suspects. One of the ladies he was interested in lived with Alex Wiwcharuk, Alice Hilburn.
He actually was someone that came uninvited. You know, like he sort of made excuses to come, and then do you want to go for a ride? Well, there's no reason to not go for a little ride around the country and whatever.
The police talked to her about Joey, but Alice never considered him capable of murder. Eventually, the cops gave up on him, and eventually, he gave up on Alice. If Joey with the Corvette was looking for attention, he got a whole lot more than he bargained for. The police lost interest in him, but the community needed a culprit, and for the longest time, he seemed to be the best available candidate. The rumors about him grew, and with them a mythology. He was guilty of murder. He was a high-class psychopath, so well-connected that he was untouchable, supposedly a judge's son. He was called a killer to his face. He eventually had to get rid of the Corvette, and he moved away. But to this day, he's so traumatized by the smog of suspicion that he cannot publicly discuss that distant chapter in his past. Can you go back and eliminate the judge's son?
He was anything but a judge's son, and we can conclusively say that individual, although a strong person of interest, in all likelihood was not the person responsible.
When we come back, the list of suspects narrows down. You'd done time for sexual-related offenses. You were out, you were in the area. If I was a policeman at the time, you would have been one of my prime suspects.
At the time, my behavior hadn't reached a level where I would be a person of interest, let's put it that way.
And now we return to the Fifth Estate.
A warm spring evening in May 1962. A young nurse, an innocent stroll by a river. A crime that changed a community. A crime that shocked and ultimately defeated an inexperienced police department. Now, after more than 40 years of questions, it may well be the victim who will provide the answers. In what may be the last chance to find a killer, police are now focused on the final moments of the victim.
She was a determined young lady. She had, although she was small in stature, had tremendous physical strength. I think everybody has told us that she would have fought like a wildcat in this situation.
RCMP Superintendent Glenn Woods is a criminal profiler and has joined the Wiwcharuk investigation.
Knowing the victim, knowing how she might react to an offender will help us decide and give an opinion as to why certain things were done that are inconsistent with what we'd expected to see with this type of offender.
Analysts now believe that the brutality of the murder of Alex Wiwcharuk can be in part explained by the ferocity of her struggle to save herself. In her desperate fight to live, she tore hair and skin from the body of her killer. And in that heroic effort, she may have provided a future generation of investigators with the clues they need to find the man who robbed her of her life.
Well, I think science is at a stage now where the distance and time is not as important, because the advances are such that if the information is available to us, which in this case it is, that we will be able to treat this case as though it was a couple of years old and not 40 years old.
There's over 1,100 names in the case file today. I believe that the name of the individual responsible for this case lies within that 1,100 names.
Among current police theories, there might have been a connection between the murder of Alex Wiwcharuk and an incident 4 years earlier, when 3 young men tried to abduct a woman from a Saskatoon street. They've never been able to nail down the particulars or to talk to those responsible. But we've been able to track down the ringleader in that particular escapade. His name is John R. Hind. You and a couple of your pals tried to drag a woman into a car.
Yeah, just down here.
What was that all about?
Just a lark. You know, we were talking
Some lark.
Oh, you know, this is just a lark. I said, probably happened on 2nd Avenue and under lots of lights, and there's a little bit of shit about it because she identified the car, but I mean, she said we didn't do anything.
It would come as a surprise to John Hind that the police believed there might have been a connection between that incident and the murder in 1962. Well, did you know that a policeman actually had you down as a prime suspect?
I'd say he's full of shit. I've drugged and I've drank. I've fought sober, I've fought drunk, I've fought drugged. I've had blackouts, but something like that, I don't think you could do anything like that in a blackout.
John Hind ran with a rough crowd that most respectable folk in Saskatoon either ignored or didn't know about. There were gangs, there was wild boozing and wild sex and drugs, but he says that even the hoodlums had their limits.
There's a lot of penny-ass bullshit that went on, thievery and stealing off of cars and stuff like that. But I mean, they might beat a woman into submission for getting them out there on the street for hustling purposes, but they wouldn't go to that extent.
But somebody went to that extent, either because he was deeply damaged or because his victim fought so hard, or a combination of both.
They should be looking at someone who had a history of some type of behavior that was escalating, that may perhaps moved out of the area in the next 2 or 3 years following the murder. But that's pretty obvious stuff. I'm sure they thought of that.
In 1962, Leslie Klassen was 19 and living in Saskatoon. A troubled life has given him a lot of insight into the mind of someone capable of such a murder.
2 theories. One would be an acquaintance, and the other one, more likely in my mind, would be someone who saw her every day and knew that she came home across that railway bridge every day. And maybe, you know, thoughts sometimes lead to actions, eh? That's been my experience anyway. You think about something long enough and then you just might act out on it.
Hugh Carlton, Alex Wiwcharuk's boyfriend, would later become a Saskatoon police officer and develop theories of his own.
I remember that I found it strange that if it was a sexually motivated crime, that there wasn't any other crimes, not only in the city, in the province, that were similar to, and same if it was a sadistic person who hated women. You know, I thought that there would have or should have been more crimes.
But how hard did they look? With the advantage of hindsight, we can report that there was at least one individual in Saskatoon at the time, and he precisely fit that profile. A man we've already introduced you to. We found him here, Mountain Institution in British Columbia, serving an indefinite sentence as a dangerous offender for sex crimes and violence over more than 20 years, starting in the 50s in Saskatoon.
Where were you living in '62?
Well, the reason I know about the railway bridge and all that is I had lived just a few blocks from that bridge. That's why I say not many people knew that you could even walk across there. It was just a railway bridge.
But you were pretty familiar with this.
Oh, I was familiar with the whole city.
By 1962, Leslie Klassen had already served jail time for a variety of sex offenses, some of them aggressive enough to have warranted serious attention.
When did you first start running into trouble with the law?
Oh, back when I was a juvenile.
Uh-huh. And what kind of trouble?
Oh, just about everything you can think of. Stealing cars and breaking into places, and a lot of indecent exposure and stuff like that, eh? And it just sort of went on, and for some reason just sort of became part of who I was, I guess.
Who he was would become more problematical. His adult record is a startling litany of sex crimes. 5 convictions for indecent exposure starting in 1960, 19 convictions of indecent acts, 2 indecent assaults. In one in 1967, he knocked a woman unconscious with a blow to the head. In 1974, during sex with a 15-year-old, the victim died from a blow to the head, after which he buried her in a snowbank.
Given your record, you'd done time for sexual-related offenses. You were out, you were in the area. If I was a policeman at the time, you would have been one of my prime suspects.
It is interesting. They never even asked me about it.
Not back then?
No, I never heard a peep from them until '67 when I committed that offense where I assaulted that woman in her apartment, and then they asked me if I knew anything about it at that time. But I never heard a peep. They never came around to see me or anything.
But it just surprises me that they really didn't hassle you at all.
I kind of wondered why they hadn't been pestering me a bit more about it, because obviously I was a person of interest because of what I did later on.
Mm-hmm.
So they figured maybe I started that violent type of behavior sooner than they knew about. So from their point of view, yes, I'd be a legitimate suspect.
It wasn't until the 90s that the Saskatoon police became interested enough in Klassen to visit him in prison. The interview was inconclusive.
Point blank. Did you have anything to do with the murder of Alex Wiwcharuk?
No.
Nothing?
Nothing at all. As I told you, I didn't even know about it till I heard it on the radio.
At this point, there is no evidence other than the circumstances of a wretched life that would link Leslie Klassen to the murder of Alexandra Wiwcharuk. Similarly, as he readily admits, there's no reason to exclude him from suspicion. This may soon change.
Okay, we've got hair.
Okay, this is seized from a suspect.
Yep. Well, these are all the same guy. Pubic hair, head hair.
These are all cut hairs, so.
Head hair. And I think they're all from the same person.
They are.
Okay. And this was done in '74. And all of these are actually in excellent shape.
Investigators now believe they are as close as they have ever been to solving the crime, thanks to DNA technology. You have DNA.
We're working on developing a profile from exhibits that indicate to us that there is possibly DNA there. We rely on the forensic lab people to tell us, yes, we have a profile for you.
These are the actual
Q1, Q2.
The tubes that were done up. Swabs. Nail scrapings from the left hand.
Those nail scrapings, skin she ripped from the body of her attacker, hold crucial information. And now technology has begun reducing a long list of what they call persons of interest to a short list of suspects.
So these are extremely valuable exhibits. Extremely.
Probably between 15 to 20 of those individuals would be individuals that we, if we were to secure a profile, would actively try to locate and obtain DNA and eliminate them. If you came up with a hit on the DNA, of course, then you would have a suspect. And if modern technologies will assist us in pinpointing who was responsible for that crime, we can close the book on our file.
Alexandra Wiwcharuk, more than 4 decades past her death, still lives. A ghost that stirs the deepest anxieties of a community. For when someone gets away with murder, it devalues the life of the victim and thereby diminishes all of us.
I knew her and I can't forget her. I'm one of the few people left who remember her face, and she deserved justice. She didn't deserve what happened to her.
She used to love Roses Are Red, Violets Are Blue. She used to sing it all the time, and every time I hear that song, I always drop a tear, and I keep thinking, when do you forget?
Police hope that their DNA comparison tests will be completed within the coming weeks or months. We will, of course, watch the story and update you when we can. Next week on The Fifth Estate, Hannah Gartner will be here with a fascinating story of a family's desperate decision.
This is Jamie Whittaker, Britain's first so-called designer baby. His birth caused a storm of controversy with critics, painting dark images of a society where children are made to order. Jamie's embryo was created in a lab, a genetically perfect match that could help cure his seriously ill brother, Charlie.
Okay, not ready yet, okay.
It was a final hope for their desperate parents.
All we want to do is not play God. We don't care whether it's a boy, girl, blonde, dark, tall, short. There's no designing involved in that. It's just selection.
Is it right to create a life to save a life? A baby for our son.
That's next week on The Fifth Estate, and a week later, we'll revisit our story about conspiracy theories. When it first aired last fall, our story about 9/11, Iraq, and the little-known connections between the Bush, Bin Laden, and Saudi royal families sparked a huge response from viewers, and the headlines since then have made it, if anything, even more timely. That's in 2 weeks. Right now, for everyone here at The Fifth Estate, I'm Lyndon McIntyre. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.